UFC 326, Holloway versus Oliveira, the rematch. I'm going to break down every fight on the card and talk about how we can make some of this. Let's get into it. We got light heavyweights kicking things off. It's newcomer Luke Fernandez making his debut off the Contender Series, taking on Adolfo Bellato. So with Luke Fernandez, this guy has incredible power, right? We saw him display that in his Contender Series fight. Granted, it was against a really low-level opponent, but there's no doubt this guy has heavy hands. He's going to throw a lot of hook combinations. Particularly, I think his lead left hook has a lot of power in it. And he's also going to use a lot of grappling, right? He's got a good double leg. Oftentimes, he'll get it from cage pressing. He'll drop to a double leg when he's clinching. He also has good trips to be able to unbalance his opponents. Really quite a few things to like about Fernandez. He seems like he's going to be able to win quite a few fights in this division, but I will say he doesn't fight at any sort of like crazy pace. He has a lot of power. He has those heavy hands I talked about, as well as some good wrestling, but just not a ton of volume. Not a lot of volume when he's striking in space. Then when he's in the clinch, he's not throwing like a lot of clinch strikes, which is, I think, an area where he could fall behind in this one. So with Bellato, we know a little bit more about him. He's got 4 UFC fights, and he has some pretty solid Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He can use it offensively, but then he can also use it to get back up if he's taken down. And he is pretty hard to take down in general. He also has a lot of good clinch work. Like Fernandez, he's going to spend a lot of time against the fence, but unlike Fernandez, he's pretty active there with his knees and elbows. Where I think he can find success in this fight is just pushing a higher pace. If he can stay safe from that power from Fernandez early, I think he's got a really good chance of winning this fight by putting forth a high pace. He has more strike diversity than Fernandez. He's just a lot more active overall, but a big problem here is his chin and his lack of head movement. So we saw Bellato get knocked out twice by Vitor Petrino. Granted, he has a lot of power, but we also saw him get hurt multiple times in the UFC, like against Ihor Pochieria. So that could be a problem here. I think Fernandez is going to be live for a first-round knockout, especially since Bellato doesn't move his head that much. But if the fight gets extended, I can definitely see Bellato having success. I think he might be able to break Fernandez as we go on, just because he fights at a much higher pace. When I look at the line, I actually like the Bellato money line at plus 195, and I bet that already. Even though I think there's a decent chance Fernandez get a round 1 knockout, I do think we can see Bellato take over the fight as it goes on. So in this matchup, give me Bellato by second round KO to kick off the card. Featherweight's next. It's Gaston Bolanos taking on Zhang Yang Li. So with Bolanos, we see he has a Muay Thai background. Prior to coming to the UFC, he had a lot of professional Muay Thai fights. And his game sort of revolves around throwing a lot of kicks, typically calf kicks, body kicks. Then he also wings his rear hand quite a bit. He just likes to throw the straight 2. But even though he's got some decent kickboxing skill and Muay Thai skill, I'm going to say he's pretty slow. He doesn't appear to be that fast. Honestly, it looks like he's moving as if he's trapped in glue a lot of the time. And I think that's going to be quite a bit of a problem here against Lee, who we'll talk about in a second. Even though I don't expect Lee to necessarily shoot that many takedowns, it would be remiss of me to not mention that Gaston Bolanos' grappling is absolute cheeks, right? It's sort of always been that way. People have had concerns about that since he's come from more of a striking background. He got submitted by Quang Lee in his last fight, and then in his debut against Aaron Phillips, he got taken down, then looked at the ref immediately to stand them up as if he just had no idea what to do from his back. I think his grappling has improved since then, but still not really a super well-developed area for him. Now, Zhang Yang Li, he's way faster than Bolanos, and he's pretty big as well. You see he's listed as 5'10", and based on what we've seen, he's typically bigger than his opponents in the cage. Lee's going to use that speed to throw some hard combinations. He often works the body well, and he has a good jab. I think that's where he's really going to get ahead of Bolanos here. In the pocket, I think he's just going to be able to get off way more shots. He's going to hit harder. He's going to hit faster. I also think he's more durable. We did see Bolanos show some pretty poor durability against Marcus McGee, and I know McGee's good, but it just wasn't a good look for him. Even though Lee is hittable, I think he's a lot more durable, right? We saw him suffer a KO loss to Hyder Emil, but that was really more just Hyder Emil throwing that 50,000 piece combination, which sort of just overwhelmed Lee. I think maybe Bolanos could have success with calf kicks, but I got to imagine Lee is going to time those pretty well with his hands. So as long as Lee's legs don't get beat up to oblivion, I see him having a lot of success here, and I actually put him in a parlay already. So give me Lee by first round knockout. More light heavyweights, and we've got another fighter making his debut off the Contender Series. It's Rafael Tobias taking on, oh boy, Nurgozhay. So with Tobias, this guy is just an absolute powerhouse. He carries a ton of force in his hands. He's a big, muscular, physical guy. He just looks like a physical specimen if you take a gander at him. And yeah, he's going to use that power to come forward with aggressive combinations, often throwing 3-piece and 4-piece combos in there. He also has some offensive wrestling and grappling that he can mix in. We saw that on display in his Contender Series fight where he won by submission. But I'm still going to say there are unknowns about this guy. If you dig through the tape, I don't know that all the questions I have are answered. For example, I'd like to know a bit more about his defensive grappling. And in his one loss, he did get chinned. He got knocked out. So we do have to have some questions about this guy's durability. But oh boy, do we have concerns on the Nurgozhay side, because this guy's UFC run so far has been disastrous. So in both fights, his fights against Brenson Ribeiro and Uran Satibaldiev, he got chinned in both, and then later in the fights got submitted. So against Ribeiro, he gets dropped in round 1, then gets submitted via Kimura when it was Nurgozhay who tried to initiate the grappling. And then last time out, Satibaldiev just dropped him, and Ezekiel choked him when Nurgozhay had full guard. That's just ridiculous. When do you see that happen? So not only do I have questions about Dr's chin, he also clearly doesn't have a lot of fortitude and mental toughness, because he is not doing anything to try to push through these difficult situations. It's like, buddy, go out on your shield. Come on. He does have some wrestling. You can see him try to drag people down from the reverse body lock. He'll sort of try to wear on people at times, but I would classify him as a low volume striker. And his power might be overrated. He has some knockouts on his record, and he got a knockout on his Contender Series fight with a head kick. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think this guy really has that much crazy power. So I think Tobias is more dangerous on the feet, and if the fight goes to the ground, I think he has better submission skills. Nurgozhay is clearly pretty easy to submit, but I'm a little nervous laying minus 250 just because I have those unanswered questions, and it does feel kind of weird having Nurgozhay going from being a favorite in his debut, having so much money come in on him in his second fight that ended up being a slight favorite, I think, to now being such a big dog. So that's a little weird for me, but I do expect Tobias to get this one done. Give me Tobias via round 1 submission. Flyweights up next, we got Sumudaerji taking on Jesus Aguilar. So Sumudaerji, you just see he has that freakish reach. He's going to use it. He's going to stay at distance, just poking with low-risk strikes like a jab, some kicks. He doesn't throw a ton of volume, and he doesn't hit a ton of combinations, but he doesn't really need to just because he's so hard to hit. He's really just going to do the bare minimum to get ahead so that he can usually outpoint his opponents. Although he does have some knockouts, actually quite a few knockouts, on his record. You look at this guy in the past, the obvious game plan to beat him would just be try to take him down. Even though he's always had decent takedown defense, decent balance, once he's gotten on the ground in the past, he's looked pretty clueless and easy to submit. I do think he's improved there, though. I sort of noticed that in his fight against Charles Johnson. It looks like recently, through all the training he's done with Team Alpha Male, he has managed to finally improve his grappling. So I'm not as worried about him if he gets taken down. Now with Jesus Aguilar, he fights like a guy who, is super short, who sort of has no choice but to just run forward like a madman to try to close the distance. And that's what he's going to have to do here more than in any other fight, because he's at a 10-inch reach disadvantage. Now, even though Sumudaerji doesn't have a ton of power, I think Aguilar might be at risk of being KO'd, because if he just charges in like a madman, Sumudaerji could just catch him coming in with like a check hook or a right hand. And when you're just running into something, the probability increases that you'll get knocked out. If you watch Aguilar, you know he's just a guillotine merchant. He's trying to hit one of those at every chance he gets. Stuart Nicol learned you don't want to get caught in that because he was rendered unconscious by an Aguilar guillotine in his debut. But I don't think Sumudaerji is going to have any interest in shooting on Aguilar's hips, at least as long as he has 2 brain cells to rub together. And Aguilar is a decent grappler overall. I just think it's probably going to be hard for him to take down Sumudaerji here because Sumudaerji has so much athleticism and balance. And yeah, even if Aguilar does get a takedown, he sort of seems to have a hard time controlling people because he's got those super short limbs. Ultimately, I think this is kind of a bad matchup for Aguilar. Sumudaerji should be able to get his game going, should be able to just work well from distance. I just don't trust him that much because he doesn't put a ton out there, and his fights can end up being sort of close, but give me Sumudaerji by decision. More flyweights, this time Cody Durden taking on Nyamjar Gal Tumendemberel. Try saying that 5 times fast. Cody Durden's a veteran of the sport, and in some of his recent fights, we've just seen him get after his opponents, show them no respect, applying non-stop pressure, and really showing off some good boxing, some decent distance management, some good combinations, really excellent work overall. The problem is that hasn't necessarily worked out too well for him, because even though he's got good wrestling and he can get the fight to the ground, it looks like his durability is fading. So in some of those fights where he's pressuring, for example, his last fight against Alon Nascimento, he seemed to be doing really well until he wasn't. Nascimento dropped him with an elbow and then finished him via submission. And the problem I have with Cody Durden is that when he's getting dropped, he doesn't always seem to have very good recoverability. So, yeah, in the past he's had a lot of losses by submission, but now he's getting finished by KO more, you know. Jose Ochoa, he's a fighter who's recently finished Durden by KO. And the chin seems to be a real weakness for Durden now. So Durden really has to be careful of that pressuring forward given that he's now chinny. But he does have wrestling he can use to bring the fight to the ground when he wants. Now, Tumendemberel, this guy just throws punches like a wild man, which is probably why he's a favorite against Durden here, because he's definitely going to have opportunities to find that chin. Durden's going to have to be really careful. However, if Tumendemberel doesn't find a big shot that drops Durden or leads to a finish, I think he's going to be in trouble, because frankly, I don't believe he's that good. His takedown defense does not look great to me. I think if Durden's going for takedowns, he's likely going to be able to get him. Then on top of that, I don't even think Tumendemberel has great stamina. Although he did learn in his fight against Fernandez, he can hurt you late, even if he gets a little bit tired, because he dropped Fernandez in the 3rd round. So ultimately, this is a super volatile fight. I believe Durden's the better fighter and should win, but yeah, he's just at such a great risk of getting finished by Tumendemberel here, since his durability is really fading. Ultimately, though, I think as an underdog, Cody Durden is a good look here, and I'm going to have to side with him because I do believe he is the better fighter. I think it's a very volatile fight that could go either way, but give me Durden by decision here. I think he can get takedowns against Tumendemberel if he wants them. Featherweights next. Alberto Montes, another newcomer from Contender Series, versus Ricky Turcios. So although Montes is a Contender Series winner, he actually won his Contender Series fight in 2024, so his UFC debut has been delayed a little bit. He hasn't been in the cage for a little while. But you'll see him sort of fight out of the karate stance a lot. He's going to throw kicks from range. Actually has pretty solid kicks, including some dynamic ones like spinning back kicks. What stands out the most, though, and you can tell this if we just look at his record, the guy's an anaconda merchant. That doesn't mean he's just looking for the anaconda like off of a sprawl if his opponent shoots in on him. He's trying the anaconda choke whenever he gets a chance, even from like standing positions. So yeah, it's probably one of the biggest parts of his game. I do have some concerns about the stamina of Montes in his Contender Series fight. It looked like he was maybe slowing down a bit early and then just got a second wind. Then in his one loss, he did get pretty brutally knocked out by a guy who wasn't ultra high level. So the durability and gas tank are potential issues on the Montes side. But holy smokes, we've got issues on the Turcios side as well. Even though he can fight with a decent pace, you know, he'll throw some good volume from distance and can work some good knees and strikes in the clinch. There's no power on any of it. So there's like not really any threat. There's no impact, not a lot for the judges to score. And as a good scrambler, even though he can work his BJJ well and throw up some submissions from his back, he really doesn't have good takedown defense at all. From a statistical perspective, it's horrible compared to the standard for the division. So usually if anyone wants to take Turcios down, they can. And yeah, really Turcios just has a goofy style. Sometimes that works out pretty well, as we've seen, you know, people talk about DDP, Dracus du Plessis, but in Turcios' case, I think it's just bad because he looks like he's off balance a lot. It looks like he's not reacting well to strikes, and that's just not good for the judges to see. So Turcios doesn't have a lot of finishing potential, and he's not really putting out a lot of eye candy for the judges to score, since he kind of looks goofy and it looks like he's not reacting to shots well. So for those reasons, it's not really surprising Turcios is an underdog. I'm not so sure I want to lay that much chalk on Montes, though, because we haven't seen him for a while, and I have concerns with those cardio problems. But I am going to say Montes can get it done here, either by decision or, of course, submission. Give me Montes by second round submission. We got to expect him to try to lock up that anaconda choke. Oh boy, we got middleweights. The hot prospect, Dante Johnson, taking on Cody Brundage. So with Johnson, we just see that this guy's a freak athlete, right? He actually fought at much higher weight classes in the past, including heavyweight, but obviously he should be fighting at middleweight. Even that is his division where he's kind of short, right? You see he's listed as just 5'8", but I think it is the right division for him. He just has so much explosiveness and so much strength that I think he's going to be able to compete with these guys. He's going to use that explosiveness to pressure forward, wing big combinations, but he's at his best when he gets on top. He's just going to rain down nasty ground and pound, brutal elbows, and anytime he gets on top, it seems the fight is going to be finished shortly after. I do think Johnson has some gaps, right? Particularly in the grappling. We saw Cedricus Dumas in Johnson's debut get him down a little bit, right? And control him. And really, Dumas is not that great of a grappler, but I do trust Johnson's heart. If he gets put in bad positions, I think he can work his way up. And then we saw after he got back up the first time from Dumas, his takedown defense was pretty solid. Dumas wasn't even close to taking him down later in the fight. So I do think Dante Johnson's going to be A-okay against some of the mediocre grapplers in the division. And speaking of some of the lower level guys in the division, Cody Brundage, I've got to say it, he's just an absolute disgrace. I don't know why he's still in the UFC. Half the time it looks like he's showing up without any intentions of even competing and like he just wants a paycheck. Brundage is taking this fight on short notice, and yeah, I think he's probably just showing up for a paycheck here. This guy quits at the first sign of adversity. He's probably the biggest quitter in the organization. If you guys know about Anthony Smith and his turtle shell technique, where he just turtles into a ball when things don't go his way, Brundage, he's learned from the best. I think he used to train with Anthony Smith and he uses that same technique. I would say he does it more than Anthony Smith almost. As soon as things don't go his way, he's just looking for a way out. And against Dante Johnson, things probably aren't going to go his way. This guy hits hard. He's going to crack Brundage. Unless Brundage somehow gets him out of there early, I don't think he's going to win. I think it's going to be Dante Johnson winning this fight rather handily. So yeah, give me Johnson here. I already put him in a parlay. I think it should be minus 900. I'm going to say Johnson does it by first round KO, although it could be later in the fight because sometimes Brundage can cockroach his way, to round 2 or even round 3 in cases. But give me Dante Johnson getting this one done. We got bantamweight's former champion Cody Garbrandt is taking on Xiao. So with Garbrandt, like I said, he's a former champion, but some people have questioned how good he ever was. Was it just luck he managed to become a champion? Was it just favorable circumstances? He does have very fast hands, right? He's got lightning speed entries where he just fires off combinations. Then he also has good wrestling to go with that. He does have a wrestling background. He can defend takedowns pretty well. And then when he wants takedowns of his own, he can usually get them. But is he really good at anything else? He's not super proficient in a lot of martial arts. There's not much of a kicking game from him, and he's not always the most technically sound and doesn't always fight the smartest. And he doesn't really have great jiu-jitsu to complement all that wrestling. On top of that, there are definitely concerns with his chin, and at this point, questions with his motivation. He was champion a long time ago now when he was very young. Since then, he hasn't been ranked for a while. So people are sort of wondering where this guy is at. He doesn't really have a clear path back to the belt, and it doesn't seem like he's pursuing it. So how much is this guy fighting for? We really do have to question his motivation at this time. Xiao, hailing from China, he's a guy who loves to throw down, right? He's never going to shy away from a scrap. He likes to trade heavy in the pocket. And even though he has made improvements recently, I think I noticed those improvements against Quang Lee, where he seemed to have a snappier jab, seemed to be more fluid. He does seem to make some questionable decisions at times. I think, he's not the smartest, and he kind of has inconsistent performances, right? So even though he's made improvements, I still think he's a little inconsistent. I don't really like how hesitant he was at the beginning of the Yu fight last time out, when he lost a unanimous decision. And I really don't like the IQ he showed against Chang Ho Lee. Chang Ho Lee is not really a guy who can do well at distance, and Xiao is just willingly remaining in the clinch with him, which is not too smart. And anytime we have one of these guys who's low IQ or inconsistent, I don't like when they have to be removed from their natural environment. So Xiao, to my knowledge, has never even fought in the Western Hemisphere, but he's coming to America to fight Cody Garbrandt, and that worries me. Anytime these guys have to travel a lot for a fight, it's not their typical environment. They have to sort of acclimate to something else. I don't like it. It just seems like they end up off a lot of the time when they get into the cage. And that could open things up for Cody Garbrandt because there aren't a lot of really good fighters he's going to be able to beat. But with the poor fight IQ, with the inconsistency, he might have a real opportunity to look good here against Xiao. He is an underdog, and in my opinion, both these guys are completely untrustworthy. But yeah, if you had to bet one side, it would definitely be Garbrandt with the plus money side. I haven't gotten there yet, but if I had to go with one of these guys, it would be the American fighting in his home country. Give me Garbrandt here by decision. A rematch of middleweights in this one. It's Gregory Rodrigues once again taking on Bruno Ferreira. Gregory Rodrigues, he's just an absolute monstrosity, right? This guy looks absolutely giant for middleweight, and he's going to use that size. He's just going to bully people, come forward, winging big, powerful punches. As if that wasn't bad enough, though, he's also got great grappling. If you try to take him down, you're probably not going to have a lot of success, at least not with holding him on the ground. And then he can mix in his own wrestling when he wants to, but primarily he likes to get it done with his hands. That's why most of his wins are by KO. He does have some chin issues, and yeah, that's how he fell to Ferreira in the first matchup. He just got brutally knocked out in the first round. Probably got a little overconfident as he was pushing Ferreira to the cage. But yeah, that's probably his main weakness, is that the chin can be cracked, and that's probably one of the weaknesses of cutting so much weight. He's a little dehydrated. Yeah, if he doesn't have a great weight cut, the chin can be pretty compromised. Now for Ferreira, he's extremely explosive, and he's constantly switching stances, looking for strikes at all levels. He can hit strikes on angles. He's honestly a really solid striker. I like his striking skill quite a bit. And when he's taken down, he can usually escape disadvantageous positions. He usually just grabs his opponent's arm, like does a double grip on the wrist and just pulls them off the front. Typically that works pretty well for him. I do think his height is a problem, particularly in this matchup. So he's listed at 5'10". I'm not sure if he's even that tall. He might be 5'9". So RoboCop Rodrigues definitely has a big height advantage on him here, and I think he's probably going to use that, right? Given that Rodrigues got knocked out in the last matchup between these two, I think he's going to be a little bit more cautious. I think he's going to be more careful when he pressures, probably utilize the height and reach advantage he has to stick Ferreira from range with his 1s and 2s straight punches. And yeah, I think over time, that approach could sort of wear Ferreira down and finally culminate in a knockout. So yeah, I do think RoboCop is going to get his vengeance here, and you see a lot of people are agreeing with that because he's a favorite. Not really interested in betting RoboCop, but I do think he gets it done most likely. Give me RoboCop by round 1 knockout. We got a clash of the OGs here. It's Drew Dober taking on Michael Johnson. So Drew Dober, we know the guy's an absolute legend. I believe he holds the current record for most knockouts in the UFC lightweight division. He eats a lot of shots, right? We know Dober takes a lot of damage. He's pretty aggressive. He's usually coming forward. He doesn't always have the best head movement, the best defense, so he can get hit quite a bit. And as a result, the chin's dying off. But I do believe he can still force a pace. We saw him pull victory from the jaws of defeat in his last fight against Kyle Prepolek. We nut-shotted Prepolek and got a point taken away. Knew he needed a finish to win the fight. He just emptied the tank, went for it, and knocked Prepolek right out. Even though Prepolek had never been knocked out prior to that. So even though the chin is fading a bit for Dober, I think he's also a little bit slower. His kicks look like they're not as fast. I do believe at age 36, he can still force that wild pace. Don't let the smile fool you guys. This man is an absolute psychopath. He's going to do whatever it takes to get a finish if he knows he needs it. He'll just not stop pressing forward no matter how badly he's getting hit. So with Michael Johnson, I do believe he's the more technical fighter. I believe he's a lot cleaner. He has some excellent footwork. He's really good at getting in and out. And yeah, over time, I think he's probably going to be the one landing more strikes here because he's got better footwork than Dober. I think he's a lot faster, even though he's a couple years older at age 38. But I do think Michael Johnson is due for a chinning, right? He hasn't been knocked out too many times in his career, but when he has been knocked out, it's been brutal. Josh Emmett slept him badly, and then most recently it was Carlos Diego Ferreira who knocked out Michael Johnson, and that guy doesn't even have that much power. So I do believe Michael Johnson is due for a chinning here. It kind of depends on to what extent Dober is going to find him, because definitely Johnson has the better footwork. I do think now that Daniel Zellhuber we just saw get knocked out by Bobby Green last night, or King Green I should say, it sort of diminishes the impressiveness of Johnson's win over Zellhuber, because he came through as a big underdog, but he did slow down in that fight. The fight wasn't really a high pace, and he gave the third round to Zellhuber. He let that part of the fight slip away. And that's not really a good look because, again, I don't think that fight was super high pace. Zellhuber was landing a lot of body kicks, but if Zellhuber's making you slow down, I absolutely think Drew Dober can take some, steam out of you. And if that happens, if Michael Johnson stops using his elite footwork and starts standing in front of Drew Dober, it's going to get ugly. So yeah, I do think Dober has enough in the tank to sort of cut off the cage here, maybe work to the body a bit, sort of break Johnson down, make his movement slow until eventually he ends up more of a sitting duck. Or Dober can just start landing big shots and exploit that chin once again. So Dober's an underdog here. I am going to lean his way ever so slightly. I am going to lean towards Dober. I haven't placed a bet yet, but he's definitely one who's tempting me. Give me Dober by knockout. Second round knockout, we'll say. Bantamweight's next. It's Rob Font taking on Raul Rosas Jr. Font, the veteran of the sport, we know what to expect from him. He's just going to pressure nonstop with that jab offense. He's going to spam the jab. He's going to follow it with a 2. He's going to double up the jab. He'll hit an uppercut sometimes. Really just nonstop pressure. If you let this guy, he's going to move forward incessantly. He does have problems with his takedown defense. It's never really been that strong. I'm not sure if this guy even knows how to spell sprawl, but typically in the past when he's gotten taken down, he's been able to get back up. Outside of a few fights like the one against Corey Sandhagen, he hasn't really been caught on his back too many times. Typically when he's taken down, he can get up as many times as he needs to. Not gonna lie, I'm still waiting for someone to knock this guy out. We've seen him hurt constantly, like the fight against Marlon Vera comes to mind, where he was dropped several times and looked like he was gonna be finished. But believe it or not, this guy still does not have a single knockout loss on his records. So still waiting for someone to finish this guy, especially since he's getting quite a bit older. Now Rosas Jr. obviously has the power of youth here. I believe he was the youngest fighter in UFC history when he first made his debut as a teenager. And yeah, he's still only in his early 20s, so this guy definitely has the power of youth advantage in this fight. What you're going to see from him is a lot of takedown attempts. He's extremely fast. He's got some of the swiftest takedowns you'll see when he shoots in for a double or single leg. And once he gets on top, much like one of his brothers who competes in MMA, Jesse Rosas, he has excellent control from top position, although he's not really doing a whole lot of damage when he gets there. And a big concern I have for Rosas is that things sort of get rough for him as the fight goes on. We've seen him sort of tire out, and yeah, I think the third round is usually his worst round. And that might be a problem here against Font, because if Font really makes him work, if he's able to get up and put that pressure on him, we might see Rosas Jr. tire out even more quickly than usual. And yeah, if Font could take over the fight by round 2, he might end up getting a decision. A lot of it just depends on how well he's able to get up. And then for Raul Rosas Jr., it all depends on how well he can hold Font down while doing at least some damage. So for me, I think this line's a bit wide here. I know we have seen Font get held down in the past. I do believe Rosas Jr. could hold him down, particularly in round 1. But we've also seen Font get up well. I think, since Rosas Jr. doesn't really do a lot to hurt his opponents when he gets them down, I think Font's going to have a lot of opportunities to maybe work submission attempts or crawl back to the fence, do whatever he has to do to climb back to his feet. And when they're on the feet, I do believe he has a big advantage. So Font, he's another guy I want to go with as an underdog here. I think this is a very close fight, but I'm going to lean ever so slightly toward the veteran. So yeah, if you had to bet this fight, I would say Font is the right choice on the money line. Give me Font by decision. Oh boy, co-main event, we got middleweights. It's Xiao Borralho, the fighting nerd, taking on Reinier de Ridder. So this kind of goes without saying because the guy calls himself a nerd, but Xiao Borralho, he's a pretty smart guy, seems to have, decent fight IQ when he's in the cage. And yeah, you're not going to see anything too crazy in terms of aggressiveness, but a lot of precise singular strikes. He can attack at all levels, legs, body, head. He's going to switch stances. He's going to mix things up. He's going to use his good footwork to be able to attack on angles. And he can also use his footwork to evade his opponent's strikes. To cap all that off, he also has some good grappling. If he goes up against someone who wants to grapple him, he's usually going to be fine. Then he can also mix in his takedowns and grappling when he wants to as well. Over on the de Ridder side, this guy is absolutely huge. He used to fight at light heavyweight, and he's way, way bigger than most of these middleweights. He's going to be bigger than Borralho here as well. And he's known for his grappling primarily. And when he gets on top, he's going to be looking for submissions. He tends to have decent control, though he can slip off the back a bit, as we saw in his last fight against Brendan Allen, which we'll talk about more in a second. When on the feet, although De Ridder's striking defense isn't really the greatest, he doesn't have the most technique, he doesn't have the most pleasing striking, he's going to be pretty active. He's going to work that jab in space, and then once he gets in the clinch, we know he likes to work his knees. Just ask Bo Nickel. But man, his last fight against Brendan Allen, short notice Brendan Allen, I'll add, was not a good look. It was a hilarious look. He became the second guy in recent history to get fourth round exhaustion TKO'd. And of course, Shamil Gaziev was the pioneer in that realm. He became the first guy I've ever seen to get fourth round exhaustion TKO, and that happened against Jairzinho Rosenstrike. But yeah, getting fourth round exhaustion TKO'd is not a good look against the guy on short notice. I know we saw him go 5 rounds with Whitaker, but let's be honest, Whitaker might be a little bit cooked in his career. Yeah, Caio Borralho should not be losing to this guy. He's the much cleaner striker, he's more durable, he should be able to negate most of the grappling. I only see him losing this fight if he just sort of falls behind on volume, but as long as he's fighting smart and just landing some clean strikes to get ahead on damage in the judge's eyes, he should be fine here. And I hope we see De Ridder gas out again and quit on the stool because, I'll just laugh my ass off. But give me Caio Borralho by decision. Finally, we got our main event for the BMF belt. We got the legends, Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, going at it. 2 veterans of the sport. So with Max Holloway, this sort of goes without saying. If you know anything about this guy, if you just know that he has the most significant strikes of any fighter in UFC history. He has excellent footwork, he moves around extremely well, non-stop volume, and excellent stamina. And recently, I think he's actually improved quite a bit around the time he started moving up to lightweight. He's been working more kicks into his game. He's really just one of the most technical strikers in the whole organization. He's been doing it forever. He entered the UFC at an extremely early age, like Oliveira. And yeah, he's kind of just mastered his craft. He's become extremely adept in the striking realm. He's also known for his legendary chin, but that might be fading a bit. There's no shame in getting knocked out by Ilia Topuria, but that was kind of a wake-up call for people because we've never seen Max Holloway knocked out before. And after that fight, we also saw him get dropped by Dustin Poirier. Again, getting dropped by people with power, but you got to imagine these people are probably softening up the chin a bit. So going forward, I don't know if we can count on Max Holloway to display that legendary chin anymore. One thing that's important for this fight is the takedown defense. It's statistically 83%, which would be very good, but I do think that's a little inflated because I don't know that Max Holloway has gone up against that many tremendous wrestlers. Volkanovski is obviously a guy with wrestling in his back pocket, but he doesn't always go to it that much. Holloway sort of just relies on athleticism to defend takedowns a lot, right? Sometimes when people try to take him down, it just sort of goes limp, and then he'll post on the ground to stay up. Really tricky for most guys to take down, but again, I'm not so sure he went up against that many great wrestlers. Like Brian Ortega is not a guy I would consider to be that great a wrestler. And also, you see Max Holloway just sort of wrapping the neck when people start to go for takedowns, which I'm not sure is always the best defense. So even though Holloway is athletic, I'm not so sure he has the best takedown defense for a technical perspective. And that 83% statistic might be a bit inflated. So with Charles Oliveira, we're going to see a lot less footwork, a lot less clean striking, but he's going to use that plotting style, and he does have good technique on his strikes, right? You can't disrespect this guy. If you let him hit you too much, you're going to get hurt. And primarily, he wants to close the distance, get to the clinch. He can work knees and elbows there, good uppercuts. And he also wants to get his grappling going from there. He can attempt takedowns from the clinch, or we've seen him just pull guard as well. Now, we talked about Max Holloway's chin being softened. Oliveira's chin is obviously softer, which is why a lot of people are expecting Holloway to get a knockout here. Again, no shame in being knocked out by Ilia Topuria, but we already had concerns about Oliveira's chin prior to that, and it's just continually being softened up. Now that he's getting up there in his late 30s, we do have to be concerned about his durability going forward, and especially in this fight. One thing I want to point out is that people know him for his submission game. I think his wrestling's kind of underrated, right? This guy is not someone who comes from a crazy American wrestling background or anything, but if you look through his last several fights, this guy is excellent at getting the fight to the ground when he needs to. Michael Chandler couldn't stuff a takedown from Oliveira to save his life. And then when Oliveira fought Garbrandt, a guy who's considered to be a very good wrestler, he was able to just body him in the second round when he closed the distance. He just sort of got him in the body lock and just lifted him off the ground, threw him down, no problem. So I do believe, despite that 83% takedown defense for Holloway, Oliveira can get him down against the fence. I think he's strong enough to get some lift on Holloway. I don't think Holloway really aggressively goes for underhooks or anything to try to take away his opponent's leverage. I think Oliveira might be able to sort of force a back take when Holloway just posts on the canvas. And I just don't think a lot of the tactics Holloway has used in the past are going to work on Oliveira. So don't get me wrong. If this fight stays at distance, I think Holloway is going to knock Oliveira out fairly soon. But I think the line's kind of wide. When I saw this fight, I was sort of leaning Holloway, but then I realized it's probably a very volatile fight. Either guy could get a finish here. Holloway with a knockout, or Oliveira getting his grappling going. This gets better than plus 200 for Oliveira. I might have to take a stab at him. Can't wait to see this fight, but I'm going to actually lean toward Oliveira. I think if you're looking at a money line, he'd be the better play, because I do think he can find takedowns here, which of course means he could get the submission. So give me Oliveira by third round submission in the main event. That's going to do it for this card, guys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you think about the main event. Who do you think is going to get it done and how? Also, we have several UFC events coming up in the next several weeks, so stay tuned for breakdown videos. We're going to cover all of those. See you guys later. Peace.